Italian Wine Podcast. Cin Cin with Italian wine people.
Before the show, here's the shout out to our new sponsor, Ferro Wine. Ferro Wine has been the largest wine shop in Italy since 1920. They have generously supplied us with our new t-shirt. Would you like one? Just donate €50 and it's all yours. Plus, we'll throw in our new book, Jumbo Shrimp Guide to International Grape Varieties in Italy. For more info, go to italianwinepodcast.com and click donate, or check out Italian Wine Podcast on Instagram.
I feel as if I'm having one of those menopausal hot flashes, but I haven't reached menopause yet.
I've been doing that for the last several months, and Savannah's quite worried about me. Honestly, I literally will put a pen down and turn around, and I won't know where I've put it.
Oh, I thought you meant menopausal hot flashes.
Oh, I can do anything for a hot flash, I'll tell you.
Round one.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. Today, to honor the Italian Wine Podcast's 4th year anniversary, I get to talk to Monty Waldin, who has been with us since the first show on March 2nd, 2017, I think. And this is very exciting. Monty is a wine writer, a TV personality, a photographer, and biodynamic wine proponent who is usually the interviewer on this podcast, never the interviewee. So, yeah, hi, Monty.
Hi there. How you doing? Is that your name? Joy. I think we've met before, haven't we?
Oh, Jesus, Monty.
I've already ruined your podcast, I'm afraid.
I know.
Round two.
I have questions, I promise. So before we get going, I wanted to tell you, I wanted you to oh, God.
Round three.
So before we get going, I wanted you to tell me a little bit about how you got into wine and how you came to live in Montalcino.
There's a reason why we don't do this every day. The short one about how I got into wine was my French wasn't particularly good at school. I went to boarding school, very posh boarding school, but very liberal boarding school. And my French teacher, who was actually French, her husband was the physics teacher, another one of my very bad subjects. And she said, I really must go to France for a summer to brush up my French, and ended up in Bordeaux, to cut a long story short, purely by accident. Although I had made wine myself at home from sort of those kits that you used to get from the chemist or the, I don't know what you call the pharmacy. And because my cousin, my father's side of the family, he'd made wine at home, and I thought I'd try and give it a try myself, never dreaming that I would end up in Bordeaux. And I just found I had a bit of an affinity for wine. And it's one of the things I felt I could understand quite easily, relatively. I wasn't always the best student at school. I mean, I wasn't like completely stupid, but I wasn't a brilliant student, put it that way. And it just felt like a good fit for me. And I kept going back to Bordeaux and then various other places around the world where there were vineyards, trying to learn as much as I could. And there we go. And I got into writing a little bit by accident. I can't even remember how I got into writing, but somebody asked me to write an article or something, and ended up I've written for Chances and Decanter and various other publications. And I feel incredibly lucky to do what I do. I mean, in the wine industry, you get to travel and see beautiful places. You meet really interesting people who have multi-skills, whether it's about biology or chemistry or geology, or the financial side of wine. So it's a sort of multi-discipline game, really, and every day's a different day. I've never, ever had a single regret about being involved in the wine industry. I feel really, really privileged, and it's fun. And so, yeah, there we go. Next question.
Okay, well, let's move along. Let's talk about cow shit. So, as you know, okay, I've seen your BBC 4, I think it is, series where you buy a vineyard.
It's cool. BBC is the public broadcaster which everybody can watch, or everybody contributes to, and then it's actually was a documentary on Channel 4 called Chateau Monty, where I rented a vineyard in the Roussillon region of France, and I had a lady, a helper in inverted commas. She wasn't hugely helpful, to be honest. I mean, she's not really involved in wine or really that interested in wine. But anyway, we made a wine there, and it was broadcast as a 6-part series on primetime TV and on Channel 4 in the UK. And I think it got obviously screened, I think, probably in other countries as well. But that was another was another fun project as well, to be honest.
Yeah, it was super entertaining, and I just couldn't stop watching it. You did all sorts of crazy things, like deterring wild boar by asking the huntsman to pee in jars so that you could spray it around the vineyard.
Yeah. That kind of works. It does work though, because they're very obviously they spent their whole life is snuffling around at ground level. So if you pee in strategic areas, then they'll know that humans are around, and they'll be just a little bit more careful, a bit more wary, and will stay a little bit further away. I mean, they can cause a lot of damage to vineyards, and they can certainly cause a lot of damage to humans. I mean, they can easily kill you, not because they want to, but just because they're scared, and they'll bump you out of the way with their tusks and all the rest of it. And you can get trampled and end up with a punctured lung or something, which is not really what you want. So, yeah, a little bit of micturition in the vineyard is never a bad thing with boar.
It was fascinating, honestly. And then you collected cow pats from local farmers to create your biodynamic preparations. And the one that you were mixing, you fermented cow poo and nettle and chamomile to make a tea. But then I wanted to ask you, what was that spray for exactly? And what are some other preparations that are quite useful? Because, it's really interesting, all of these things. I mean, it seems complicated, but it's also, if you know how to do it, it seems like anybody could do it.
Yeah, I mean, the teas are actually, as you say, they're really easy. I mean, if you can make a cup of tea at home, you can certainly make a tea for a vineyard. So anybody that drinks chamomile tea before they go to bed, you do it as a relaxing thing. My partner, she's a female. Sometimes she feels a bit, every so often, and she'll have a chamomile tea. And it's the same for your vineyard. If your vineyard is stressed because it's very bright or very hot, dry conditions, just spraying a tea or a tisane, as they call it, like chamomile on the vineyard, just gives them a little bit of a respite and stops them from stressing. And it's a very cost-effective way of treating your vineyard with, I think, apart from respect, but also with common sense. You don't need to blast the vineyard every 5 seconds, but these teas are very useful. I mean, nettle tea is a very important one. Nettles have been important in human development. They're full of nutrients, nettle soup, that kind of thing. And so if you spray the soil or the vine with a nettle infusion or tea, obviously when you make a tea with warm or hot water, but you don't spray it when the liquid is still hot. You let it cool down, obviously. But you're just giving them a little bit of a boost. And to stop them stressing. And if you do get stress in a vine, that can affect the flavour. You can maybe get slightly edgy tannins or a little bit of unripeness or greenness. So it's a cost-effective way of working with your vineyard, using plants, nettle, to cure your plants, which are the vines. And that, for me, makes a lot of common sense.
I'm assuming the fermented cow poo, it does something, and you put it in horns. And I want to know why you put it in horns, and why it's so good for the vines, because it's like the most famous thing when it comes to biodynamics.
Yeah, well, the preparation you're talking about is called horn manure. And basically what you do is you take some cow manure, so from a lady cow, a female cow, preferably when she's in milk, and you put that manure into a cow horn, which is like a sort of a sheath, and you bury it at about, a foot or more in some nice earthy ground. And you do that over winter. You bury it in autumn and dig it up in the springtime. And the idea there is that you're going to create a sort of enhanced manure that when you mix it in water by hand or just stirring it with even a stirring machine, you stir it a little way for an hour, and then you spray it lightly on the vineyard, on the soil. And the idea there is it's really encouraging the vine or any plant that you're growing at the time to dig down and encourage it to dig down and make a more complex or deeper or both root system. And that's good for the vine. It's like a foundation for a house. If you've got solid foundations, which is a solid root system, your vine can start choosing the nutrients that it actually wants to absorb or use in terms of its own particular growth. And that's really, really important. One issue that we have in all farming, not just wine growing, is very compact soil. And by spraying this nutrient and microorganism-rich spray on the soil, you're creating tiny little pockets of air in the soil to make it more spongy, which makes drainage more easy, which means that there's less erosion. With less erosion, there's less loss of nutrients. that your vines need. And if your vines don't have nutrients, they start stressing and they're more disease resistant. So it's a really simple way of keeping the understory, the root system of the vineyard, the foundations of the house nice and safe and strong. And it's very cost effective. I mean, to make a horn manure spray with a horn and a bit of cow pat, I mean, it's just like minimal cost. I mean, I don't know, maybe you get a cow horn from a neighboring farmer for free, and a bit of cow manure, which is for free. You can do it yourself. You don't need any machinery. A kid can do it. An old person can do it. All you need is a shovel and a bit of elbow grease. And I like, again, the idea that you can be entirely self-reliant. You're not feeding money to a faceless multinational concern producing chemical fertilizers, artificial fertilizers. You're doing it all yourself, which is better for your bottom line. It's better for your local community, and it's better for the soil, and it's better for the wine itself, for the vines and the wine. So it makes sense again for me.
So, okay, the other thing I wanted to ask is in between the rows. This is another biodynamic thing that I noticed you talk about, clover and putting, bumper crops, I think you call them, in between.
Cover crops.
Cover crops, sorry.
That's okay. We do actually put them in with bumper cars. We actually go through the vine rows, sowing the seeds for the cover crops on bumper. No, I'm joking. But this is the cover crops. So basically, but people that don't know what cover crops are, I'm sure you all do. But between the vine rows, you can obviously plough the vine rows, but you really don't always want to do that in all situations. Sometimes you need to. But the idea is by sowing what are called cover crops between the rows, you can sow flowers which attract beneficial insects, which means that it's much harder for potential pests to colonize completely the vineyard. There may be a few pests, but not too many because there's competition. You can sow cover crops that produce deep roots into the soil, which allows air, oxygen to get into the soil, allows better drainage, so there's less erosion. And you can sow cover crops to provide certain nutrients like nitrogen, for example. If you sow nitrogen-fixing cover crops, they'll give a boost to the vineyard and the vine. If you have a weak vineyard that lacks food, and that's not always the case often in wine, people do tend to go overboard, but you're just providing a few nutrients for the vines. And again, the nice thing about these things is with soluble fertilizers, the vine absorbs those soluble fertilizers or chemical fertilizers by osmosis. When it rains, they're soluble, and the vine can't really stop itself from taking up those nutrients, and you get more vigor, you get thinner cell walls in the vine and its leaves and the grapes. So you have more risk of rot because the vine is less robust. Whereas in the organic and biodynamic way of doing it, with cover crops, you sow some nice plants between the vineyard. Some of them will give nitrogen to the vineyard, and the vine can choose how much nitrogen it might want to have. It might be a bit hungry, and it can choose what it eats. It's not being force-fed. So again, if you want to talk about intelligent wine growing, you've got to have intelligent vines, and vines that can choose what they eat are more intelligent, I think, than a vine that is on a drip feed.
My question is, I don't know where I heard this, but some wineries are actually planting foods, vegetables and things in between the rows. Is that something?
Yeah, I mean, some of the cover crops, if you sow barley, for example, you could use that to make, obviously barley, you can use barley for various things. Normally, though, what you don't want is too much compaction between the vine rows. Normally, you would, with something like barley, you would actually cut that in at some stage during the season, and that when the stalks of the barley fall to the ground, they protect it. So if it rains before, let's say in the autumn, and you've got the barley flattened on the ground, you'll get less erosion because there'll be less splashing, for example. And slowly but surely, the stalks of the barley will rot down in a non-bad way, and they'll become humus in the soil eventually. So it's kind of quite a joined-up, simple way of managing your vineyard. Also, having cover crops between your vineyard, between your vine rows, means that you get less erosion, because if you have a naked vineyard with just bare soil and it rains and you're on a slope, and the best vineyards in the world generally are on sloping terrain, if there's no ground cover, when it rains, you are going to lose your soil. And so having a carpet or a mat of vegetation that just buffers falling rain from above, it means that there's less risk of erosion. Once your soil is gone, you can't go down to the local do-it-yourself garden centre and say, please, can you give me some 3 million year old or 5 million year old Pleistocene clay, please, because he's not going to have it in stock, I'm afraid. So there you go.
Is it something that's viable for larger, like economically speaking? Is it, can large vineyards go biodynamic, or is it just not feasible? Like, what do you say to that?
No, I mean, we've got some very large vineyards now, like in Chile, for example, that are about 600 hectares that are biodynamic. Doing biodynamics is actually very, very easy. It's similar to organics in the sense that you don't. Organics is a lot about don't do this, don't do that. So don't use herbicides, don't use systemic sprays, don't use X, Y, Z. And biodynamics is a little bit of that, but it's more about do this, and do this. So do make sure that you have cover crops between your vine rows for biodiversity, for to make sure that there's no erosion, that you're getting air into the soil, and all of these things are very so multitasking. Cover cropping is actually doing 2 or 3 things that are beneficial for your vineyard, not just one thing in your vineyard. And really, you want to see your vineyard as an entire organism. So that's not just the vineyard bit of your land, but it's all the land that you have. Maybe it's spare fields or a bit of forest, or just a bit of scrub ground. All of that is part of your terroir, or everything. It's not like the vineyard is just the only thing you're thinking about. You're saying, yeah, we have a vineyard. This is what gives us the money, but we have a little bit of forest, we have a little bit of biodiversity. What can we do to make our little bit of land that's not vineyard? What can we do with that to improve the situation of our vineyard? And if it's not directly about the vineyard, just about the land entity that you have in general, in terms of biodiversity, because the more biodiversity you have in terms of, birds, insects, microbiology, the more complex your terroir becomes. There's more of a story to tell when the journalists come around, but there's also more of a story that you can benefit from by treating your land mass as something very, very diverse and diverse pieces of that land mass. Some of it's productive, the vineyard, some of it is wild maybe. And it's a nice way, again, of looking at your estate you see your terroir in a different way. It's not just about the vineyard, it's about the whole land holding that you have.
How long does it actually take for a regular vineyard to become biodynamic, to convert, like a year, 2 years?
Okay, so legally it's 3 years. So if you're using herbicides and pesticides, etc., you switch to biodynamics, you have to stop using those. And 3 years later, you get certified, which is done by an independent body, which is called a certification body. So you can be certified organic or certified biodynamic, and they follow international rules or national rules. That takes 3 years from start to finish. And so in the beginning of the 4th year, you can then say that you are certified organic or certified biodynamic.
Okay. Biodynamics, of course, is connected to Rudolf Steiner and this sort of religious side, right? And so what do you say to people to separate the sort of
esoteric stuff? Yeah, well, I don't see it as any kind of religion. I mean, I'm quite Cartesian. I mean, I got into biodynamics because I tasted a biodynamic wine, and it was so much better than the other wines that I've been tasting at the time, which was in Bordeaux, and I'd spent a lot of time in Bordeaux. I'm in the practical area of the biodynamic world. I'm not really into the really esoteric stuff. I mean, people who are a little bit esoteric, that's absolutely fine, but I'm quite Cartesian about that. I see biodynamics as a bunch of tools that I can or cannot use, and using those tools, I want to understand them, how I can get the best out of them, and also empirically, you can see the differences that biodynamics makes in terms of, I said before, stronger rooting, vines that are not over vigorous. They found their balance, that the ripeness levels of the pip, as well as the skin and the juice, all tie up. So you've got extra. It's in terms of red wines, for example, you've got red wines which are obviously maceration wines. They have to soak in the tank with everything, with the pips and all the rest of it. If you have unripe pips and alcohol, which is being made by the yeast during fermentation, alcohol is a solvent. So if you have green pips because your vineyard wasn't in balance, you're going to get green tannins. So, and with biodynamics, you're not going to get that if you do it properly. Obviously, if you don't do it properly, you maybe not get the best results, but you probably get slightly better results than, say, a conventional farmer. And for me, obviously the mantra that wine is made in the vineyard, it's very much like that in biodynamics, because you really can do so much with the very basic biodynamic tools in terms of deeper rooting, more complex rooting, more erect physiological, the way the vine actually grows itself. If you look at its shoots, rather than the shoots drooping over the top wire, the shoots are really pointing up towards the sun. The roots are really deep or more complex. So you have a vine that's really extending itself. It's got long legs, it's got high arms, and it's got a tummy in the middle, which is where the grapes are. and that has a really strong stomach. If somebody punches that stomach, it's really robust. So this idea that you've got plants that are looking after themselves, they're growing in the right way, they know where to put their roots, they know where to put their shoots, they know how many grapes they can carry to do the job properly, because their job is not making wine, their job is about making ripe pips in their berries, quotes, to have babies, and that's really what they're trying to do. And biodynamics makes that a little bit easier for them. It just allows them that freedom to do what they really want to do. And I think the majority, of biodynamic growers that I know, having been following it for a long, long time, the vast majority switch to biodynamics because they like the taste of the wines that they have. They're not really into the woo-woo stuff. They're doing it because they're in a results-driven business and they get results with biodynamics. And a lot of them say, Monty, I don't know how this works really, but it does. It's not very scientific, but that's what people say. So
I was going to ask you a couple more questions, but you know what? We're running out of time because we have, you have not me, you have an interview with another producer in about 10 minutes. So I'll skip to the end. I wanted to ask you actually, there's so many things I want to ask you. I don't even have the time. Okay. So what's your favorite interview over 4 years? What interview?
Honestly, I just don't know. I mean, I've had interviews where I kind of not dreaded, but I thought, well, I don't know how this one's going to go. And often the ones that you are a little bit fearful about are the best ones. I mean, there have been so many. I mean, I don't know how many interviews I've done, but when I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time literally going around Bordeaux, knocking on people's doors or making appointments and interviewing people, obviously with a pen and a piece of paper. At the time, and with a really probably horrible haircut in those days. But it's just, I'm curious about how people make wine. It's like, I guess, if a foodie would love to hear the recipe for, well, how did you make that amazing omelette, And you want to know, where did the eggs come from? What color was the shell? How big was the yolk? How did you crack it open? What temperature? All that sort of stuff. And I like asking winemakers questions, and they often, not all of them, but the vast majority are very happy and very, very happy to share their knowledge and tell you exactly what they do and why. And the best winemakers, I think, have a grasp of the technical aspects of winemaking. Obviously, it's a living product. It's without yeast and bacteria and all sorts of things. It doesn't come to life, and you have to be empirical as well in terms of the costs as well of the actual grape growing. In terms of your labor costs and all the rest of it. So you have to be a multitasker as a wine grower. You need to embrace many disciplines. From biology to geology. Finance, marketing, all sorts of things. People having an affinity with people, whether they're whether they're the employees or they're your importer or distributor in maybe a foreign country that you can't get to, or maybe don't speak the language so well with. And I think it's a marvelous industry full of a lot of very, very interesting people. And interviewing people I find fascinating. I like to hear people's stories, and I like to hear them bring to life what their everyday reality is. I find it really interesting.
All right, so penultimate question then. This is a little bit on the lighter side. So I had to try and dig some dirt up on you, which I found nothing, but I did find a B-Dale's website, your old school. And it said that you were asked to bring something you had made to the B-Dale's entry tests in 1980. And a 12-year-old you arrived clutching a bottle of your homemade orange wine. Can you please elaborate on how you made this concoction? And you were 12.
Yeah, I think it was made with some fruit juice and fruit juice and a bit of water and some yeast. It was a very long time ago, but I had to bring. I had made a chess table, I think, from my previous school, and I brought that, and I brought some homemade wine, and somehow they allowed me into the school. It's a very creative school. It's called Biodynamic, and it's a co-educational school. It's a boarding school, and you could wear your own clothes. If you were a girl, you could wear a skirt or jeans or whatever it was. You didn't have to wear a uniform, nor did the boys. And it was a great place to be, because it allowed you, whatever you were good at, you were encouraged to follow it. And I wasn't always particularly academic, and I wasn't the worst in the class. But as I said, it was because my French wasn't that good, and my French teacher, who was French, told me to go to France, and thanks to her, Odile, she managed to get me to France, and I discovered wine, and I've never looked back. So thanks, Odile.
Cool. Well, honestly, I appreciate you humoring me. Let's say thank you for humoring me. There's something I didn't mention. You had written a book on biodynamics. So my last thing will be to ask you where you can find your book. What is it called? And tell me where we can find you.
Okay, so the website it's free. It's a free website. It's not like a paywall. It's just called www.chateaumonty.com. And the book that I've written quite a few books, but the book, if you want to know how biodynamics actually is done, it's a book called Biodynamic Wine, and it's published in Oxford from a company called Infinite Ideas. And I think it's probably about £15, US pounds, something like that. But it tells you everything about biodynamics.
You read some of it. You narrated on the podcast as well. You narrated some chapters from that here as well.
Did I? Okay. Oh, yeah, it was a while ago, wasn't it? Yeah. But it just tells you about the lunar cycles and the practical aspects of biodynamics. It's really not a fundamentalist book. It's very, very down to earth and easy to read, if I say so myself. I'm not a Taliban when it comes to biodynamics. For me, it's a tool, and I kind of explain the tools, and you can make your own minds up about whether it's woo-woo or whether it's common sense or whether probably it's a little bit of both. But anyway, and I got into biodynamics, as I said, because I've worked for conventional wineries and organic wineries in various places, and the best quality for me was with the biodynamic wineries that I work for, and that's how I got into it, because for me, having tried all the different ways of making the cake, the biodynamic cake was the best one.
Cool. All right. No, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess that's all she wrote. I have one last question. After 4 years of working with us here, and having Stevie Kim as your how scary 1 to 10, how scary is Stevie to work for?
375.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, Cin Cin.